well, I suppose they are environment variables if you're familiar with the command line interface on basically any operating system. But basically, we can do a set, and you see there's a bunch of stuff set already. IP address, TFTP, and if we do another question mark, there's a couple interesting options here. We've got this TFTP download, and right in the description there, TFTP image download. So we're going to set up something called, well, I already have something called a TFTP server, where I'm going to host a version of iOS that's compatible with this router, and we'll be able to download it to the router. We can also use a protocol called Xmodem, which is this console hosting a file, and over the serial connection, that console, that blue console cable I was showing you, we can actually transfer a file that way as well, but it is heinously slow. We'll see how into this I get. Maybe we'll try that as well. But first, we're going to go with TFTP. So if we do that set again, you need to set a bunch of variables, and I can't remember if the previous owner had tried this already, but someone has already been trying to get a version of iOS on here. So they set the IP address of the router to this, they set the TFTP server where they were hosting an image of iOS to that, and then they had a TFTP file. Ours is going to look very similar to this one. Maybe what tripped them up, I don't know, is we've got a spelling error here in default gateway. We're going to have to reset that. So what we're going to do is fire up a TFTP server. We're going to host a bin. We'll go through and set all these variables for my network, and then we'll transfer the file over to the flash memory of this thing. And when we do that and reboot it, it should just boot right into iOS, assuming there's nothing critically wrong with this router. I don't actually know. Obviously, I haven't done this yet. But we have to do a little segue. I want to get this thing on a network hosted by what I'm calling the retro rack in the other room. It hosts a 10.0.0 network. That's where the TFTP server is accessible. But I need to do a little housekeeping. This is a clean up the lab video. So let's get in that room. This is the retro rack. At the bottom, I've got some bitchin' IBM P5 gear. In the middle, of course, we've got some Sun Microsystems Sunfires all racked up. And then right here is the heart of the operation. We're a Cisco shop, as you can see, for better or worse. The main router is a 7200 series VXR. And then we've got some 3550 and 3500 series gear here. This is the main aggregation switch, meaning all the other stuff connects up to it. It can do 1 gig. Which is pretty fast. So all these switches, this big guy, basically everything aggregates through here. This fiber connection goes to here. The switches are gigastacked. I've got a bunch of videos on that if you're curious what that means. Together, these three guys right here. And then this one is actually something that can do inline power. So that is a way to deliver power to things like Cisco IP phones, that predates the Power over Ethernet standard, and you would use that for obviously the Cisco IP phones and other stuff. I've got a video on that, and there will be videos on that in the future. Now, I made a couple mistakes when I racked this up. The first one is this switch here, which I have everything flowing through, is not as good, not as powerful. It's just not as good of a switch as this one that's sitting here doing nothing. So the first thing I want to do in this little housekeeping video, I want to swap the positions. I only want to turn this thing on when I need inline power for things like the phones. And this one's going to be the main switch for everything else. So right now there's some other networking flowing through this, so I have to fire this guy on whenever I want to do a bunch of stuff like this TFTP server. I promise we're gonna bring this full circle back to that 2600. Another mistake I made, which didn't bother me too much, if I'm being honest, this aggregation switch is really frustrating. It's 1.5 U's. So you see these lines right here? That is a U. It stands for rack unit. It's a standard height. And this thing is 1.5 of them. And what I did for aesthetics is I just bumped it up against this, but then you have this like half U you're dealing with. And a lot of people in previous videos were pretty unhappy that all the stuff under that doesn't line up with the U marks. You can see that, like, here's my patch panel here, and it's got part of it is messing with this U mark. That doesn't bother me too much, but I think in the end they're probably right. So what we're going to do is I'm going to move this down so that it lines up with the bottom of this. I'm not explaining this very well, but you'll see in a second. Basically, I'm going to have a gap here, and that'll be nice because I can flow things like the fiber connect up to the router through that gap instead of bringing it around like I am today. And then of course, I've got this other problem where this thing isn't hooked up to anything. I was gonna throw another one of these are called patch panels. They just flow cables out the back and I can plug these into the switch. The whole point is that you should be able to remove an appliance, in this case the switch, without having to uncable a whole lot of other stuff. So the patch panel makes it so I can pull out all these cables, pull the switch out, and I don't have to worry about a bunch of crossover or anything like that. And it's convenient to just plug stuff in to the back, but I made another critical error. I'll explain that later. So the plan is, we're gonna get the big dog in here. This is a 48 port patch panel, 2U. It's gonna be between the two switches. Both of them are gonna be wired up like this, one going this way, one going the other way. And that way I can pull both appliances out if I need to. In this case, I have to pull everything out, but you'll see. And then the most critical error I made was I've got a 1U patch panel right here. And so you can see I've plugged a bunch of stuff into it, but my hand doesn't fit. That's as far as I can get my hand in between these two things. So everything in the middle, I can't actually access. You wouldn't usually do things like this, but I'm kind of going for like, I just like how it looks. So the dream here is with the 2U patch panel, I'll have no problem getting my hand in there, getting to these keystones in the middle. These are amazing. You buy these on Amazon, they come with these things called keystones. You can actually pop these out and it's like fully populated. They're not expensive, but they're not cheap either. So that's a pretty nice option. So anyway, long story short, we need to power all this stuff up to get to the TFTP server. And I'm gonna use this as a nice excuse to clean up the rack a little bit. We're gonna swap these switches, because I want to use this one in regular operation. I only want to use this one for IP phones and anything that requires inline power. We're going to drop this a little bit. Once the 4-port patch panel is in there and this one's out, I think this whole thing is going to be filled all the way to the Sunfire here, except for a little gap at the top, and I'm not happy about it because I like having all this stuff flush, but I'll figure that out in the future. So basically, I'm going to get to work rearranging all this stuff. I'm gonna have to drop this switch. I'm gonna have to move everything, actually. I'll bring you back after I get this one lowered, and then we'll get everything racked up and we'll recable. Little pro tip, this racking hardware is very, very strong. So this thing's quite heavy. It's the heaviest one I'm gonna have to deal with. But you can take the top bolts out, and as you can see, it's such strong metal, and the bolts are so strong, the cage is so strong, the rack, that it can rest, you know, gravity and everything, and these bolts are enough to hold it in. So now I'll bring you along. Luckily, I have space. It's going to get trickier the lower we get as we rearrange everything, but this thing's going to get real heavy. I think it wasn't as bad as I thought putting in. So I'm putting a lot of pressure with my left hand, keeping this thing up. That screw is basically out. And I'm essentially holding it up with my hand right now. Okay, that one is free. And we're basically gonna move, Jesus. Oh my God. I think I have like the wrong ears on this thing or something. Anyway, it's fine where it is. I'm gonna have to redo these cage bolts, and I need to kind of decide where I need to put this thing. I think something like this. I'll bring you back in a second. Not gonna lie to you, had a couple miscalculations, blew the faceplate off. That's known. That's what the tape's for. It's in now with one bolt on each side. So what I want to do is get this as high as I can, because I have this wasted space up here, and that's what I was kind of trying to avoid the first time. But that's okay. It's as high as it'll go now. I will continue. Okay, we're looking good, and in a rare win for me, my calculations were correct. Let me tell you. This is going to go here, and that last switch, we're going to try to sneak it in right here, hopefully.